Wales, the criminals justice caught up with in December and what happened to them. Here is our monthly roundup of the criminals who have been locked up for some of the most serious crimes in Wales over the past month. December was a busy one as the year drew to an end, with many convicts being jailed and starting 2023 behind bars. They include a paedophile who sexually assaulted 4 children and will be 100 by the time he is eligible for release, and a man who killed his own sister, among others. Here are the faces of the criminals locked up for some of the most serious crimes in December.
Emmett Morrison. The killer will serve at least 28 years in prison after beating his vulnerable neighbor to death in a brutal and prolonged attack in his own home. Morrison punched, kicked, and struck 66-year-old Timothy Dundham with a blunt object before pushing a heavy wooden cabinet on top of the stricken man and then walking out, leaving him to die alone. The gravely injured man may have lived for up to 2 hours after the assault, but rather than seeking help for his victim, Morrison instead walked to the nearby flat of a pensioner in search of drugs, and when he couldn't get any, launched a vicious attack on the 74-year-old. Matthew Selby. He was jailed for 5 years for killing his 15-year-old sister at a holiday park. Selby attacked his sister Amanda after an argument in a caravan at the Time Warner Holiday Park in Tywyn, near Abergele, on July 31, 2021. At Mold Crown Court, the 20-year-old, who pleaded guilty to manslaughter by diminished responsibility at an earlier hearing, was given extended sentence of 10 years made up of a 5-year custodial term and 5 years on extended license. Morgan Wainwright. The teenager killed a beloved family man with a single punch after taking drugs and drinking heavily on a night out. Wainwright, then 19, hit Andrew Nicholas near the King's Head Wetherspoon pub in Monmouth, and the 43-year-old never regained consciousness. Wainwright pleaded guilty to the manslaughter of Mr. Nicholas, described by his family as an amazing, wonderful, and loving son, brother, and uncle, in an attack which took place in the early hours of the morning in Monmouth Street. Mr. Nicholas, a talented golfer from Poole, had been visiting the area with friends on a golfing trip. Newport Crown Court heard. Heath Edmonds. The paedophile who sexually assaulted 4 children will be 100 years old by the time he will be eligible for release. A judge condemned the defendant for his lack of remorse after he accused his victims of lying during his sentencing. Edmonds, 86, committed sex offenses against children over a 14-year period and stripped his victims of their childhood. He denied the abuse but was found guilty of 11 counts of assault following a trial at Merthyr Tydfil Crown Court. Mayhill rioters. These are the faces and names of the people who have been locked up for their role in the Mayhill riots. The Swansea community witnessed sickening devastation and damage in May 2021 after what was supposed to be a peaceful vigil for a local teenager who had died turned violent. Those involved in the rioting range from school children to men in their 40s, and as a result of the disturbance 7 families have now left the Mayhill area or want to do so. Anthony Hampton. The victims of the former counselor and teacher who sexually abused them as children worried they wouldn't be believed because of his influence. A judge told Hampton the character he portrayed throughout his life was a facade. The 75-year-old ex-Vale of Glamorgan counselor was convicted of indecently assaulting 2 boys in the 1990s, following a trial at Newport Crown Court. He repeatedly rubbed his penis on one of the boys' shoulders before masturbating in his presence, forcing the boy to masturbate him and masturbating the victim. Anthony Smith and Joshua Murphy. A Swansea man was subjected to a sadistic punishment, beating over an unpaid debt after being lured to a city flat and kidnapped. The man was kept prisoner in the property, had his hands and feet bound, and was beaten, tortured, stabbed, and threatened. He was then told he was going to be buried in a makeshift grave in the garden, and was told his girlfriend was going to be tied up and dragged behind a car as it drove along the motorway. Gemma Kelshaw. She dragged an 82-year-old pensioner to the floor and grappled with her as she tried to steal her handbag. Kelshaw, who has a history of violent offending, attacked her vulnerable victim in broad daylight at a bus stop. The ordeal has left the victim frightened to go out on her own and unable to meet friends at the local social club or catch the bus into town.
Drugs gang. Clockwise from top left. Nicholas Gale, Jake Garland, Jamie Christopher, and Spencer Perks. 4 men were jailed at the start of the month after police busted a huge cocaine and heroin operation that saw drugs being trafficked from the West Midlands to various parts of Wales. Nicholas Gale, Spencer Perks, Jamie Christopher, and Jake Garland were responsible for a multi-kilogram supply of cocaine and heroin and were caught as part of Operation Cruise. Liam Fox. He joined his older brother's drug-dealing operation after losing his job and seeing an opportunity to mack Robert Draper. Quick and easy money. Fox was caught with 119 wraps of heroin and £1,000 in cash in his house after police had seen him acting suspiciously on the street. Sending the defendant to prison, a judge told him heroin is a drug which causes untold misery to users. Zach Thomas and Ryan Abraham. Cocaine dealer Thomas Rand unmarked police cars, then told officers it was lucky he had not been driving something big like a Range Rover or he would have killed them all. The undercover officers had to draw tasers and use batons to smash car windows in order to arrest Thomas and Abraham after they had tried to flee. Officers had been looking for Thomas after he had been seen carrying out a suspected drug deal in a car park behind a row of shops on a Swansea housing estate. Robert Draper. The drug dealer was caught after he walked into his local village post office and tried to send thousands of pounds worth of heroin in a parcel. Robert Draper, 52, went to Langadog Post Office in Carmarthenshire on June 4, 2021. He told the postmaster that he wanted to send a package to Carmarthen. However, the postmaster became suspicious due to Draper's demeanor and the fact that the package only had an address on it, as he did not want to put a recipient's name on its front. You can get the latest Wales Online newsletters emailed to you directly for free by signing up here. Natalie Price. She threatened the shopkeeper with an imitation firearm after being caught shoplifting. The weapon was described as looking like a small black handgun. Price, 38, attended the Londes store in Newport and was spotted stealing a bottle of wine by Niraben Thrumaruan. He told her to leave the shop, but she returned later that day brandishing the weapon. Dino Price. The cocaine-fueled driver used his van as a battering ram by reversing into police during a chase while being tasered behind the wheel. He caused more than £40,000 worth of damage and sped up to 80 miles per hour through residential streets. The 22-year-old was traveling along the A472 in Hyfforddurnes, in Caerphilly, at around 7:20 p.m. on August 30, 2021, when he dangerously overtook a vehicle and an unmarked police car signaled for him to pull over. He ignored their request and carried on driving. Edward and Daniel McCann. The father and son cannabis dealers moved to Wales to set up a multi-million-pound family-run drugs business. Dad Edward and son Daniel were already running a successful cannabis operation in Hampshire when they decided to relocate across the border to expand their business. After spending months searching for just the right property, they bought an isolated house with large outbuilding in Carmarthenshire and set about transforming it into a production and distribution centre. Terence Harrison and Sean Lucas. A drugs gang was shipping large quantities of cocaine and cannabis from Liverpool to Pembrokeshire via Dorset. The crime group was taken down by a major investigation by Dyfed police, which included covert surveillance of a suspect's property in Fishguard. So far 6 of the gang have been jailed for their parts in the conspiracy, but one major figure remains at large: Corey Rowlands. A man was left with a nasty gash to his head after a glass bottle was thrown at him in a pub. The incident was caught on CCTV and showed the perpetrator aiming the bottle at his head. Smirking Rowlands, 20, assaulted Jamie Evans at the Harpin in Gallagher, Caerphilly. Police were called to the pub and spoke to Mr. Evans, who was reluctant to speak to them. Jaden Green, the young drug dealer found in possession of £10,000 worth of cocaine and around £15,000 in designer clothes, has been ordered to pay back £11,000. The defendant was also found in possession of a Rambo knife and knuckle duster. Green, 21, of Cardiff, matched the description of a vulnerable teenager when he was stopped by police in Lanishan, as he was riding a Sur-Ron electric bike and wearing various labels such as a North Face coat and Nike trainers. He tried to ride off but was detained and searched. Billy Hearn and Callum Booth. The two dealers were openly counting their drugs on a table of a busy morning train. Other passengers on board the service to Swansea were so concerned at what was happening they called police, and officers were waiting for the pair when the train arrived. The day after they were caught red-handed, the care home worker who sexually abused a vulnerable resident said he was only comforting her. Shaheen repeatedly kissed the woman and touched her breasts and bum and put his penis in her mouth. He told his victim the activity was their little secret and showed her photos of his wife and children back home in Pakistan and said while his wife was number one, she was his number two. Bardhack Market. With their stash, one of the dealers went on to carry out an armed robbery of a shop, which saw him subsequently handed an extended sentence as a dangerous offender who poses a risk to the public. Samuel Shaheen. He traveled to the UK in the back of a lorry and was found working in a cannabis factory with more than 200 plants. The gang who employed him refused to pay him and threatened his family back home in Albania. Mark, who, 48, was arrested at a house in Nantymol, Bridgend, after police raided the property and detained him in the kitchen. They found a total of 214 cannabis plants with 4 rooms dedicated to the production of the drug. Gavin Emmett. The cannabis dealer known as Fat Gav was discovered after text messages were found on a customer's phone. He frequently sent out text bombs advertising drugs and offered 3 different strains of cannabis. Messages from the 31-year-old were found on the phone of Samantha Greville after the authorities had seized the device. They managed to trace the defendant's number and arrested him at his home in Abertillery, Blaenau Gwent, Elton Musta, Lidian Zoffa, Loring Kobo, and Renato Shaiti. The Albanian crime gang was using a Neath house as a base for its cannabis growing and distribution business. 4 men were arrested at the property, one after fleeing through an upstairs window, and police seized more than £14,000 worth of the harvested drug along with a stash of passports. Officers also recovered a number of mobile phones, and though the text messages contained on them were in Albanian, the pictures, selfies, and videos recovered were of interest. Read more and see the pictures here. Chris Mazie. The convicted sex offender borrowed his mother's mobile to search for images of underage children after police had seized his own phone following the discovery he had been in communication with 12-year-old girls. Mazie was on a suspended sentence at the time, having previously been caught with a haul of child sex abuse images, and was also the subject of a sexual harm prevention order designed to control his online activities. Simon Sterling. The abusive man hit his former partner over the head with a plank of wood and went on to strangle her adult daughter when she threatened to call the police. He later burgled shops and caused significant damage. Sterling, 41, assaulted his ex-partner after locking her in her flat in Treorchy, Rhondda. She said he was acting paranoid, accused her of looking at him, and subjected her to many assaults throughout the night. Mark Smurthwaite. The arsonist was caught on CCTV setting fire to bins in a block of flats where he lived. The fire left residents psychologically harmed after the flats had been set on fire 6 times previously. The 46-year-old entered the basement of the Greenwood Flats in Newport but was seen leaving shortly later as smoke started billowing. The emergency services were called and managed to stop the fire before it took hold. Thomas Goodyear. The dangerous offender was jailed for 20 years for the rape of a woman in North Wales. The 25-year-old, of Street Helens, Merseyside, had been found guilty of 2 counts committed in Conway County. Benjamin Donnelly. The carpenter likened to Jekyll and Hyde left his 71-year-old mother terrified as he injured her arm and hurled abuse at her for hours. Sally Donnelly, who said her son is usually nice and polite, fled to a neighbor's home to escape his latest attack on her. Prosecutor Nugober told Newport Crown Court that Thames Donnelly was at her home in Lanishan, Cardiff, with her son when she questioned him about his use of cocaine and he became enraged. The defendant started trying to pull his mother from her chair and grabbed her left forearm, said Mr. Gober. Clifford Taylor, the former yacht club manager, sent a video of himself masturbating to a 9-year-old boy. He also asked the young boy for naked photographs. Taylor, 40, was convicted of 2 counts of sexually communicating with a child following a trial at Cardiff Crown Court. He denied the offences and continues to maintain his innocence despite the verdicts.
Lee Williams. The bus driver repeatedly raped and sexually as well as physically abused 5 teenage girls and left them feeling suicidal. The majority of the girls were underage when he preyed on them, a court heard. Williams, 32, of Cardiff, groomed his victims by buying them jewelry, cuddly toys, and food while lying about his age. Once in a relationship with the victims, he raped them and subjected them to further degrading sexual acts which left them injured and crying. Richard Cook. The brazen burglar stole a huge haul of mail after sneaking into a postal depot in the dead of night. Cook was seen pushing large trolleys full of parcels, none of which have ever been recovered, away from the building. The 36-year-old has more than 100 previous offenses on his record, and a judge branded him a persistent and relentless offender. Stanim Raisanov. He was jailed after subjecting his partner to years of abuse where he threatened her with a boiled kettle and a cable around her neck. Asanov was sentenced to 14 months in prison at Merthyr Tydfil Crown Court for his actions. The defendant pleaded not guilty to multiple assaults, but a jury found him guilty of assault amounting to grievous bodily harm during a trial in October. A statement from South Wales Police commended the victim for coming forward after feeling trapped in the relationship. Stephen Voice. The parasitic man sexually assaulted and strangled a disabled elderly woman during a months-long campaign of abuse. Voice admitted he found it a bit erotic to touch the victim's private parts without her consent. He drew crosses on her body as well as forcing her to read him Bible passages and give him money for beer. Connor Davis. The Swansea man was found with Class A drugs when stopped and searched in the city while driving his mother's car without insurance. Swansea Crown Court heard how on December 31, 2021, at 6:55 p.m. police stopped a vehicle being driven by Davis along Pentramore Road in Swansea. He told officers he was driving his mother's car and that he was not insured to do so. He was asked if there was anything in the car he should not have, and he responded, "I have cocaine in here," while pointing towards the glove box. "Saw me." The thug attacked a taxi driver with a whiskey bottle and left him with lacerations to his head after refusing to pay his fare. He also threatened to smash the taxi up unless the driver gave him money. 35, wounded taxi driver Khair Mohammed after a trip from Cardiff city centre to Splot. The attacker had got out of the car without paying and became violent when confronted by the victim, Matthew Cleary and Mikkel Kujdala. The successful property developer from Cardiff and a man from Albania produced thousands of pounds worth of cannabis across 8 cannabis farms in the city. Cleary and his accomplice Kujdala profited from the cannabis factories in and around Cardiff in a conspiracy thought to have involved more than 100 kilograms of the Class B drug, Cardiff Crown Court heard. Michael James. The paedophile filmed himself sexually abusing a 10-year-old, then threatened to release the footage if the boy told anyone. Michael James from Merthyr Tydfil attacked 3 boys and raped 2 of them. James, now 66, terrorized the children in the 1990s and 2000s. In one case he threatened to kill a 15-year-old boy if he revealed the abuse, Cardiff Crown Court heard. Stephen Semmons, Andrew Botto, Shane White, and Ewan Williams. Welsh drug dealer Semmons, pictured top left, left Colombia never to return after snorting cocaine from the grave of feared drug lord Pablo Escobar, a court heard. Semmons' barrister said his client's actions, which were put on Facebook, did not go down well with criminal confederates of the former cartel boss and were a sign of his naivete and of the Walter Mitty fantasy world he was living in. Semmons and his fellow cocaine dealers were jailed at Swansea Crown Court for their parts in peddling the Class A drug. Peter Morgan. The drug-dealing football coach was caught after a traffic stop on his van. A strong smell of cannabis in the vehicle led officers to raiding the house he shared house with his older brother, where they uncovered a cannabis production and supply business and a cocaine dealing operation which had been going on for years. Michael Kingston and Chelsea Reese, the couple, plotted to stab a dog breeder in the stomach in a revenge attack after she sold them a puppy which died. Reese fell asleep and missed the stabbing, but boyfriend Kingston went without her and plunged a knife into their victim when she opened her front door. Swansea Crown Court heard Reese had wanted to stab the dog breeder 13 times, one for each puppy in the litter, and wanted her to suffer and feel pain. The couple have been locked up for 5 years each.
Damian Jones and Lucas Byrne. Dad-to-be Jones was caught dealing cocaine, weeks after appearing in court for dealing cocaine. The Bridgend man may have avoided jail had he not been busted a second time. The 21-year-old was sentenced alongside Byrne and Connor Ockerby, both 19, after the trio were arrested and admitted drug offenses. Police had noticed Jones in the street with another man and searched them. The officers seized Jones' phone, which had texts suggesting a deal was about to take place, and when a car arrived, the officers noticed a strong smell of cannabis from inside. Shane Thomas. He knocked on a pensioner's door under the pretense that he wanted water before exposing his penis to her. As she tried to close her door, he pushed against it in an attempt to prolong his exposure to her. Joseph Jones. The high-ranking Welsh police officer corruptly accessed information for a woman, then forged a notebook in an attempt to deceive a jury. The former South Wales Police Chief Inspector took a truly epic fall from grace, a court heard. The 48-year-old misused a police computer system to gain information on a woman who had been his cleaner and at one time had sexual activity with him. The woman was also a landlady who became involved in legal action against her tenants, and Jones used the niche system to look for information about them. Andrew Howell. The tree surgeon attacked a man with an axe following an altercation at their local pub. Howell armed himself with the razor-sharp implement and repeatedly stuck his victim to the face and head in the street, leaving the man bleeding and gravely wounded. Daryl Price. Price was jailed for 15 months after he disguised his car with fake number plates before going out and performing a sex act in front of a jogger on a busy main road. A court heard the 29-year-old has a previous conviction for exposure in similar circumstances. Cameron Isaac. A young cocaine dealer was supplying wholesale quantities of the drug to dealers for onward supply to addicts, a court heard. Cameron Isaac was involved in selling large quantities of the class A drug over a 2-year period until one of his customers was caught following a high-speed police chase and his number was found on a mobile phone. Akel Maskeen, a heroin and crack cocaine dealer, was jailed after police uncovered his stash in a Cardiff neighborhood. Akel Maskeen, 22, tried to make off from officers on September 30, but shortly afterwards he was detained in a shop.